Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Cannabis has been legal here in Canada for more than 7 years, and we all know just how easy the drug is to buy. In many cities, there's a cannabis store seemingly on every corner. However, most provinces have not introduced any ways for cannabis to be legally consumed, particularly for tourists. There's no so-called consumption lounges where you can both buy and smoke the drug. And some experts think that means Canada is missing out on a lot of big tourist dollars. I'm Richard Southern, and today on The Big Story, is it time for Canada to open consumption lounges? Joining us for a closer look at this, including how other jurisdictions are dealing with it, is Dr. Susan Dupej. She's a post-doctorate fellow at the University of Guelph. Dr. Dupej, thanks so much for being here on The Big Story today.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
Happy to chat with you because this is a really interesting topic, one that I know I kind of think about. I like to travel, and I think about this when I go to other places in the world. Like, I've been to Amsterdam in the last year or two and to Las Vegas, and you kind of see how it's done a little bit differently in these areas than it is here at home in Canada. We're talking about cannabis, but from a tourism perspective. How is it in Canada right now for tourists who want to come and maybe imbibe a little in that, Susan? Is it friendly?
Well, I wish I could say it was. I think what I can say is that it really wants to be. There's an industry here in Canada overlapping cannabis and tourism together. There are businesses and entrepreneurs and people who are ready and willing to take on this industry in a very respectable, sensible, and responsible way. The way that legalization has turned out in Canada, given the policy frameworks under a health and safety regulatory regime, the Cannabis Act, which guides all of the laws for cannabis in Canada, it doesn't turn out to support cannabis tourism and hospitality in any way. And so in one of my papers, we've talked about there being a quote unquote regulatory gap. This gap largely being around consumption. The idea that, and as you said, this is why people want to come for the majority of the part to Canada or to any destination is to consume the cannabis of the place. Now, consumption doesn't necessarily always have to be part of the recipe when it comes to tourism, but it very often is, and it very much overlaps with tourism and hospitality. So without the right regulations in place for consumption, and I'm talking about consumption in all of its forms, from combustible, so we're talking about smoking and vaping, to edible formats, to infused foods, to beverages, to topicals. You can talk about healthcare products or skincare products, things of this nature. So there is a range. There's a range of ways in which cannabis can be consumed. However, it's not allowed right now in Canada in a commercialized format in any way.
Right now, Susan, if I'm a tourist, I can obviously come here and, see our cannabis stores on almost every corner. I can go in, and of course, just like we can, I can buy cannabis. But the question then, I guess, is where do I smoke it, and where can a tourist smoke it right now legally?
Right. So options are very limited. And it's interesting because there's maybe a misconception amongst tourists who are maybe coming from, I don't know, Europe or from, let's say, Australia or New Zealand. There's a misconception that consumption spaces are perhaps readily available. People are always asking me, Susan, where are the consumption lounges? So to answer your question, I mean, there really are no spaces.
They have to smoke it on. They have to smoke it on the sidewalk, correct?
Right. Exactly. So we're talking about public spaces like sidewalks, depending on what city you're in, that is allowed or it's not allowed. So you as the tourist have to do your research with respect to where you can consume. You might also find accommodations, whether it be on Airbnb. So there's a private accommodation there. It's very difficult to find more commercialized accommodations that are on board with cannabis consumption, although that is coming. And some of them do provide outdoor consumption spaces for any type of combustible material, whether it be cannabis or tobacco. But yeah, in large part, being a cannabis tourist in Canada is, great selection of retail, really interesting array there. But then you as a tourist are left basically to sit in your parking lot back at your hotel or motel to sample what you've purchased while you're out on your vacation and doing your traveling. That's how I've done it mostly in Canada, unless you know certain spots. I've also asked locals as well where can you go, and they often point me direction of the park, the public spaces.
This is not just a problem of tourists. It's certainly an issue for those who live here, right? It's something you basically have to take home to consume in many cases.
Yes, and that's not exactly, and that's a great point, right? And some people would argue that's completely not fair and inequitable and perhaps even classist, because not everyone has a private accommodation. Not everyone has that luxury. Many people who consume cannabis live in rental accommodations where they don't have that option to consume it. And so that is not fair. Never mind the tourists. You're exactly right. That's not fair to Canadians.
Susan, are you proposing a change here? Would we benefit from allowing consumption lounges, bar-like spaces where we can smoke cannabis?
Yeah, I think that it's worth investigating. Absolutely. It would open up the cannabis supply chain by addressing, right, all the service possibilities around cannabis. Right now, there are very limited service possibilities in Canada. We look to the States, you look to California, West Hollywood, pardon me. Where else? San Francisco. You mentioned Las Vegas, right? Planet 13. Denver, Colorado, Illinois, Michigan, even New York. All of these places are working on this business model. So it's not exactly, the model has yet to be perfected. It's still very much being worked out, but it's not necessarily like we're reinventing the wheel here. So it's curious, right? It's curious that there is an industry where we can gather data. And this is where me as the researcher, my interest comes in understanding, well, what are other places doing? Because it's working there. What are they doing?
We both mentioned Las Vegas, and I think it's an interesting case because it allowed the sale of recreational cannabis quite a number of years ago. And much like it is in Canada, there were really nice stores where you can go in and get it. But then tourists were like, well, most of my hotels don't allow me to go back and smoke it there. And it was a problem for Las Vegas. And they've actually done something about it. You mentioned a place called Planet 13. Tell us a bit about what this is. It's a big, really big consumption lounge where you can actually go and legally consume marijuana. No booze, though, right? But you can go and legally consume marijuana there in Vegas.
That's right. That's actually a pretty common policy across statewide, is that cannabis cannot be served with alcohol. And so, yes, you're right. In Nevada, what happened, it's the same thing that happened in Canada. It's a cross-jurisdictional problem in that, yes, the state can sell cannabis, but there was no place to consume it socially in public. So it was the exact same problem that we're running into here. Also an issue happening in Thailand, by the way, the exact same. In Jamaica as well, I've received emails from people in Jamaica that are commenting on that problem. But you asked about Planet 13. So yeah, talk about a tourism attraction. This is a great opportunity to understand the intersection of mainstream tourism. It doesn't get much more mainstream than Las Vegas. This is Sin City, right? So let's throw cannabis in there as well. And so if Las Vegas can adequately manage its cannabis consumption realm, it's cannabis tourism industry, then arguably other destinations can as well. But Planet 13 is a huge, not only consumption site, but it's also a retail location. And from what I've read, I've not been there myself, but from what I've read and from what I've heard, it is an overwhelming experience. There are all kinds of visuals. There are all kinds of promotions. I believe that you are not given, but you are, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, I've lost the word. Allocated, I guess, a service person or a bud tender. And they will walk you through the menu and give you explanations and answer any questions. And so it is a true experience. When we talk about tourism, we often talk about wanting to experience places. So it's very unique in that way. I don't think that I think perhaps it's maybe an exception. With respect to being a large scale attraction at a destination. And I mean, arguably, people would go to Las Vegas just to experience Planet 13, I think. So it would be primarily cannabis driven.
Right. Here's the difference, though, right? I mean, you could go to Vegas, and in a lot of bars and casinos, you can light up a cigarette. The smoking laws in Canada, I think, are a lot more strict. So the question always is, how do I allow, as a government, a cannabis consumption lounge and get around the very strict non-smoking laws that are in place?
Well, and see, okay, so this is you've identified the crux of the problem. Anti-public smoking laws in Canada, these are regarded as the highlight of Canada's health policy. Like this is a pinnacle policy that is put on high. It's put on a pedestal. And so you're absolutely right. There's going to be, we can talk all we want about how, there's opportunities to move forward. But with these anti-smoking laws, this is where we run into a lot of challenges, especially with respect to indoor. It's more likely in Canada, we're going to see outdoor consumption spaces. We have already. There are places that are developing these areas, but outdoor consumption is more likely to develop first in Canada before indoor consumption. Having said that, there are avenues, I suppose, around not being able to have indoor consumption. One of them is research, getting a research license for consumption. So I think it's called Lit Research in Toronto would be an example of that. And so they have a space where people can come and they are able to consume cannabis inside. And so whatever the regulation is for that, whatever the requirement is for that particular business is able to meet those needs. Having said, so that's a positive thing. That's a positive thing which says that there is an opportunity to develop indoor consumption. I would argue, however, that research licenses isn't exactly a sustainable approach when it comes to planning for tourism and hospitality. Nonetheless, it does exist. Also, having research lounges was a way of enabling social spaces of consumption during prohibition, prior to pre-legalization. So it's not exactly an advancement.
Right. But, we don't have to smoke cannabis at all. We can eat it. So what are the opportunities, or drink it for that matter? What are the opportunities then in Canada for bars or restaurants to serve edible or drinkable cannabis? Because they can't do that right now, right?
Yeah, they can't. I mean, outside of industry events, this is one avenue where perhaps you might be a cannabis supplier or a sales representative. I know that these industry events are working towards being able to supply samples to people who attend the events. So that's one avenue. But outside of that, it's difficult. You can't find any type of venue. There are services. Actually, I shouldn't say that. There are bar services which you can hire. So if you are having a private event like a wedding or some other type of celebration, Christmas time, you can hire bar services that serve cannabis. So they will bring cannabis on site. There's an arrangement that's made based on how many people are going to be coming to the event. The cannabis gets bought by the person putting on the event, and so the bar service can come in, and the venue also has to take responsibility as well. And so there's liability, but there has to be agreement that this can take place in the actual space. Outside of that, however, there are no opportunities to purchase an edible. You go to the retail location and you sit on the sidewalk outside and you eat your cookie or whatever, or you cross the street and you eat your cookie, and like that's it.
So what is your hope then, Susan? Or do you believe that there's any hope at all that this market will mature in Canada to allow some sort of consumption space, whether it's smoking or smokeless? What are your hopes that this will actually ever happen?
Well, I know that there are very hardworking people out there. There are advocates and industry organizations, both provincially and nationally, not-for-profits that are advocating. And they're not paid for any of the work that they're doing. They're doing it because it's the right thing. And so with these good people in place at the moment, there are good things happening. There's education as well is an important component. So the more educated our leaders can be, people in government, I think the better decisions that they can make. So that is an important part of the strategy moving forward as well. I hope to play a role in that. So I do think there is hope, and I don't think the snowball is already down the hill, right? It's already coming. It's already like the momentum is there, and I don't think it can be stopped. We are at a point in Canadian society where we're seeing an evolution of social progression. This is a socially progressive society here. I mean, look at this. We're a cannabis-friendly society. Not only that, we need to also show that we have a responsible cannabis culture, which we do. And having the regulations would just forward that even further.
What type of economic effect would this have, do you think?
Well, I mean, according to the reports I've read, it's in the billions, and this is great. I love hearing the reporting on this. And I mean, I haven't read the reports; they're very expensive, and so I can't comment on the methodology with respect to how they arrived at their values that they arrive at. But yeah, cannabis is a resource for tourism, just like wine is a resource for tourism, food is a resource for tourism, the natural environment is a resource for tourism, the culture of a place is a resource for tourism. And so I believe it's a huge opportunity that a lot of folks want to take advantage of. There are so many innovative entrepreneurs that have great ideas, but right now they've been halted. They're stifled because there are no regulations that enable them to carry out the business practice that they would like to carry out. I do have hope. I do have hope, and I do think there will be change. We will see change, especially if we want to compete with the United States moving forward, and the innovation happening down there around social consumption.
Absolutely. And I mean, I remember walking through Amsterdam, and of course, they're famous there for their quote-unquote coffee shops that also sell cannabis. It's a system that appears to work there, and it's a system that's starting to work in places like Nevada. It'll be interesting to see if we get to see it here at home. Thanks so much for an interesting chat and for joining us here on The Big Story.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me.
And that was The Big Story. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this conversation. You can find us on X at The Big Story FPN, or send us an email at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca. You can get new episodes of The Big Story every morning, Monday through Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to leave a comment or share with a friend. I'm Richard Southern. Thanks so much for listening.